Hi, and welcome to TTELT, Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers, a program of educators worldwide. I'm your host today, Melanie Gobert.
Hello, everyone. This is Melanie Gobert, your host for today's episode of the TTELT podcast, Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers. Joining us today is Wyndell Williams. Wyndell is a teacher at the Tsinghua International School in Beijing, China, and he's going to be talking to us about building bridges in TESOL, culturally responsive strategies for inclusive language education. Wyndell?
Hi. So my presentation, Building Bridges in TESOL, I was drawing from my experiences as an international educator. And I've been teaching for about 12 years now, mainly in Asia. I've taught in China, Bangladesh, and Mongolia. I've also worked with students from primary to secondary and undergraduate students. So I just drew upon all that knowledge and created this presentation mainly to help people that are new to working with multilingual or diverse learners, and also to get experienced educators thinking about how to find more innovative strategies for their current practices. So one thing I mentioned in my presentation was the fact that I speak 3 other languages. That's Chinese, Mongolian, and French. And I believe being multilingual has helped me to put myself into my learner's shoes, because I know the struggles that they are having learning another language. And another thing, as a language learner, you want to make sure that your teacher provides strategies that are tailored for your specific learning needs. And you also want them to make the lessons as engaging as possible. That's going to help out with the overall motivation and success for the classroom and learner. Now, the 3 strategies that I had presented were incorporating multilingual approaches. The other one was using culturally relevant teaching materials. And the last one was building inclusive classroom environments. And I talked about different ways teachers could do that. And I also shared my experiences from the different countries and settings that I have worked in. And I also tried to integrate some innovative strategies that experienced teachers could use who may have already done these things in their current classrooms. And one thing I also touched on in my presentation was the use of AI. So like, we're in this whole AI buzz right now. We have some people who are against it, some people who are for it. I'm new to it myself. And in my presentation, most of my visuals were actually AI created. So I wanted to show teachers that they could possibly use AI to create certain visuals that could help tailor the specific needs for their students, just as a more so simple example. Now, a more advanced example I gave was using AI bilingual avatars in the classroom. I know not all schools would be able to do something like that, but I tried to cater the schools that could possibly do that, just so they can see different ideas as well. But that whole part of the presentation was to just get people thinking about the benefits of using AI in general in their classrooms and how they could possibly do that. And towards the end of my presentation, I talked about what I thought was the key for success in TESOL. And what I said was just being adaptable. Like, the different countries I've worked in, the different international schools I've worked in, I've had to adapt to those particular settings. what that meant was I couldn't necessarily use the same teaching methods or set of materials that I used from other schools. Yeah, I could like pull from those, but I had to tailor them to the needs and to the specific teaching context that I was in. So I talked about how like if we stay adaptable, number one, we stay up to date with our practices. We stay trying to find different ways to keep the learning fun and fresh for our students. And overall, it helps us not to get stuck in our ways because I know that could happen as educators sometimes, being stuck in your own ways. So yeah, because education is constantly evolving. Like look at this whole AI thing, for example, and it's up for us to stay up to date with these different things or advances in education.
Okay, well, can you tell us what are some effective project-based learning strategies for English? What EAL is that? English for academic?
Uh, uh, English as an additional language, because we have students who.
Okay, what are some?
Uh-huh. Okay, so I
I
would
was
say
just going to say, what are effective strategies for English as an additional language classrooms?
okay, so I would say consider.
Project-based learning. Mhm.
Uh-huh. I would say consider like incorporating collaborative projects that emphasize real world tasks, such as creating presentations
Mm,
or conducting research, also utilizing
mm,
visual aids, hands-on activities, and scaffolding techniques to support language acquisition.
mm. And what are some other ways that teachers can integrate technology? You mentioned some ways to integrate AI. What are some of your other favorite technology tools?
Yeah, so like I would just say explore language learning apps in general. Like you have some that'll give some free trials. You can try those out. Let's see. I know for my primary students, one learning app that I really love is Vocabulary. It's really fun. It's like how can I say this? It's like teaching through using songs, and I found that really effective for the young learners. I've even tried it for middle school and high school, but not as much as I do for like at the primary level. And just looking at interactive websites, different multimedia resources tailored to language acquisition, and just overall encouraging students to, well, if they are older, encouraging them to engage in online discussions, language games, and maybe even like virtual simulations to practice and reinforce language skills.
Mhm. And then what role does cultural competence play in teaching English to speakers of other languages?
So it emphasizes cultural awareness and sensitivity in language instruction by integrating authentic, let's say, cultural materials, discussions on cultural norms and practices, and maybe even giving students the opportunity to share their own cultural backgrounds with each other or with the whole school, if that could happen. Because, well, in this case, it's up for the teacher to foster an inclusive language learning environment that respects and celebrates the cultural diversity of their school. And I think it's
Mhm.
important because it
So
helps
at the
them.
school,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Well, I said I think it's important because it helps them feel connected with the whole school community.
Mm-hmm. What about in situations where the class is monolingual, okay, all from the same cultural background?
Okay. Yeah. So
I
I
mean,
actually
because
work.
that's reality in most of the English language teaching world. You don't have
Yeah.
mixed groups of international students.
Right. So I've actually dealt with that in many occasions. First of all, I'll talk about here in China. So my students at my current school are mostly ethnically Chinese. However, that said, Chinese culture is ethnically diverse in itself. So these children actually come from different ethnic Chinese backgrounds. So just exploring those different backgrounds is another way to do so in the classroom if it's done effectively. When I was in Bangladesh, again, most of my students were ethnically Bangladeshi, but they had different religious and cultural practices. So we had a chance to share those, or we gave students a chance to showcase what their families practice religiously or culturally to the whole school community. I remember in my homeroom, I forgot which festival we were celebrating as a whole school, but I've never heard of it before. But luckily, I had one student who came from that specific background, and she was able to show us what her family does during this tradition, and we got to learn about it, which was like really cool. I got lucky that time. Let me think. Also in Mongolia, there are different ethnic backgrounds as well. So again, I had a chance to learn about the different ethnic backgrounds of students and the different things that their specific, I would say, ethnicity celebrated as a whole that was different from, I don't want to say different, but that was part of Mongolian culture as a whole.
Okay, well, Wyndell, I think our time is just about up. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, everyone, this has been Melanie Gobert, your host for today's episode of TTELT, Teaching Tips for English Language Learners.
For joining us today. Share with us how you are using these tips. Leave us a comment or voice message on social media or at ttelt.org. Thanks for joining this episode of TTELT, brought to you by Educators Worldwide. Follow, like, and subscribe to TTELT on your social media, and try a new teaching tip today.